listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN.
7 days, only 7 days until the NFL season gets started, and we still have some contracts left to be signed for some of the best players in the NFL. Welcome to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. And you're hearing a new voice here. I am Harrison Sanford, a new host with the VSiN Network. And Michael, I must say it is going to be a pleasure to work with you, my friend.
I am looking forward to it, too. And we vetted you out, so we understand that you have watched The Sopranos, which is a requirement to get on this podcast. You cannot enter into the you cannot enter in the GM Shuffle world and not know what Artie Bucco is going to make for dinner tonight. So we appreciate you coming in. I'm excited to have you a part of our VSiN family, and your energy has given me energy. So I appreciate you, Harrison. Although I heard you were a Knicks fan, which is great. I like the Knicks too. So we'll have a lot of conversations about the 76ers and the Knicks, which I'll probably be on your side of that.
Yes, indeed. I am definitely a Knicks fan. And I'm sure my energy will be even higher as the NBA season comes closer. But this is the GM Shuffle. We talk about the NFL here, and I'm so excited to get into the National Football League. But I will tell you this. I will say this. While I do find myself as a fan of The Sopranos, recently I have been doing a rewatch of Breaking Bad. And Michael, I forgot how great the show is. Oh, my goodness.
I got to do that. I have to go through that because I love Bryan Cranston. I think he's great. And the Wire, Breaking Bad, The Sopranos, those shows don't age. They're still good. They hold up to time. They really do.
They don't. And speaking of another show that doesn't age, there's another one where there's a famous line where CeeDee Lamb, if he was in this guy's position, would say, everything is pretty good. That's Curb Your Enthusiasm, Larry David. And that is how CeeDee Lamb must feel. He got paid, people. 4 years, $136 million extension. Him and Jerry Jones finally came to an agreement. $100 million guaranteed with a wide receiver record, $38 million signing bonus. Things are sitting pretty good for him at this moment. Your reaction to Jerry Jones and Lamb getting the deal done, because there's other wide receivers out there who haven't been able to.
Well, my reaction is, why did it take this long? It shouldn't have. I mean, the market was set. It was pretty clear, and Lamb knew what his market was. Now, I think obviously a lot of this was I didn't want to go out to Thousand Oaks. I didn't really want to have to go through camp. I think I could get ready at a certain point. And I don't know how much the deal changed from, let's say, last March to today. I'm sure it did, but not that much. Look, the other deals are really, the Brandon Aiyuk deal, the Trent Williams, I think those are separate deals. The Aiyuk deal is inexcusable. It's really about Aiyuk. I mean, he is, and I think John Lynch mentioned this today, that it's time to play football. Like, I think when you have players that are not self-aware, that don't understand the market. I mean, Tua said it very clearly. He said, look, the market is the market. You could say I'm overrated. You could say I'm not a drop back passer. You could say I'm an RPO, but I play quarterback. I play in the NFL. I've won X amount of games. I've put X amount of numbers up. The market's the market, right? That's what it is. There's nothing you could do. The market is the market for Aiyuk. He's not better than DJ Moore. That's the end of the story. He's not better than A.J. Brown. That's the end of the story. Like, at some point, when is the kid going to handle it? He didn't want to go to New England because he didn't want to play for the Patriots when they were offering him over $30 million. So if you want the money, take it. If you don't want the money, do a deal. Like, I don't understand why it's going on so long. I can only imagine if I were John Lynch or Kyle Shanahan, I'd be pulling my hair out. I mean, this is the kind of things that make it so challenging. As for Trent Williams, look, I think it's, to me, they know they need him. And as you know, as I know, before we came on the show, that jet line, because of the Jets being so popular, because of the Jets being so good on pay. We call the Jets here on our podcast the Ifers, because if they're healthy, they're good, and everybody's betting them. It's down to 3.5.
Yeah, no, big line movement there in terms of this 49ers versus the New York Jets game. That's Monday Night Football in Week 1. And let's go back to this Brandon Aiyuk situation and obviously Trent Williams as well as it pertains to the 49ers. There's just a level of uncertainty how they will go into the season because of these absences. At some point, do you feel that it will actually impact them on the field if these guys eventually get back out there? Because there has to be something said for continuity. There has to be something that's said for actually getting out there. We've seen it multiple times, year after year. Players who are not in camp, not practicing with the team, you never know. Next thing you know, there's a hamstring injury, and a player could be out for an even significant more amount of time. And Trent Williams is a guy who routinely, year after year, it seems as if already has missed time for the 49ers.
Yeah, I think they feel like Trent could come in a week before and get ready to play. Now, can he play as good as he does after 7 or 8 practices? Well, that remains to be seen. But I think they feel like that. I agree with you. I would worry about Brandon Aiyuk because I think here's the reality. You know, the reality of it is that all these Deebo Samuel was on the team, held out for a long time, and didn't have the same kind of year, and was very clear that the holdout really made it very difficult for him. So, look, if you're Kyle Shanahan, the biggest issue you have right now going to face the Jets is what's our left tackle situation look like? How are we going to handle that? Are we going to be able to block? Are we going to be able to do the things that we have to do at left tackle without our best player on the field? Can we run the football? What are we going to have to handle? I think all those things come into play, and they don't want to put Jalen Moore out there, the 5th round pick in 21. I don't know how they'll handle it, but it is an issue. Right now, they're going to be tackle poor.
With their issues, I feel like a 7-1 bet for the Seattle Seahawks to win the NFC West is a worthwhile investment. I do think that Coach McDonald, Mike McDonald, the new head coach there for the Seattle Seahawks, coming from Baltimore, I do think he could raise their level on the defensive side of the ball. I am hoping and I am predicting that maybe they get a lot more out of those 2 first-round picks that they had in this defensive secondary. Devon Witherspoon from Illinois, they drafted last year in the top 10. I feel like they can be a better team on the defensive side of the ball, and the offensive weapons, even though people are mixed opinions about Geno Smith. I still believe with the talent that they have with DK Metcalf, with Jackson Smith and Jigba, with Tyler Lockett, with Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet, I believe they could be a live threat to win the NFC West. We'll transition to some another wide receiver in the AFC, but how do you feel about that one?
Well, I'm with you on that. I'm 100% behind you on that. I love Seattle's team. I think the offensive line's got to improve. There's no question. I mean, I'm shocked that they're moving almost to a 6-point favorite against Denver. I think the betting market sees them as a good team too. I think McDonald, he got 19.5 sacks out of Jadeveon Clowney and Kyle Van Roy off of the. He was on the Pat McAfee show. They get him off the couch. So he's a good coach. Look, they're going to be better on defense. They were horrible last year on defense. They couldn't stop the run to save their life. They're going to be better on defense. There's no question. Now, Geno protects the football. And I think Kenneth Walker is a very unsung player. I think he's going to do really well. But for me, I like him. I really do. To win the West, I think that takes a bold statement. But look, we've seen it happen before. Teams have gone from – I mean, this time last year, nobody, including myself, would have said Houston's going to win the South.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Hey, listen, when it comes down to a future ticket, I'm not betting something that doesn't have any a big-time reward at the end. So 7-1, that's a future ticket that I'm worth risking. All right, let's go to another wide receiver, and this time – in the AFC. And it's a little bit tricky here because one day Zach Taylor says, we'll have Jamar Chase for week 1. The next day, Jamar Chase comes to practice late in street clothes. Doesn't give off I'm playing in week 1 type of vibes. What is going to happen here? Let's predict it. 7 days from now, where are we with the Jamar Chase situation?
Well, look, Mike Brown, the owner of the Cincinnati Bengals, said he wants to pay him. Now, the question here is, does he make more or does he have the same contract as Justin Jefferson? Now, they're coming in 2 years early on this deal. He's not even in his 5th-year option. He's in the 4th year of his rookie deal. So this is early. So they're ripping up 2 years of a contract. They're actually ripping up 4 years of a contract. So the 2 years that they own the rights to him on, which would be this year and the fifth-year option number. So you add those two numbers together, and then the 2 franchise years you could add together. You put the total sum of that number together, and for those 4 years, they own his rights. Now, he can hold out, but he's going to get fined. He's going to get fined. He's not going to show up. So I think they've got to do something here, because they've made it clear. They've let this problem linger. Like, they've let it go. Like, to me, when you're in your 4th year, unless you're practicing, we shouldn't be doing your contract. Like, I would have made it very clear that, look, you're not holding in. If you want a new contract, practice. We'll work on it as hard as we can. But you're going to have to honor the 4th year. I mean, now all of a sudden, we've seen these 5th-year options just get blown away. Like, they don't count anymore. Meanwhile, the 4th year now could easily get blown away by this holdout. Mike Brown wants to pay Chase. He wants to. And I think the question is, does he pay him a little bit more than Jefferson, or does he give him Jefferson's deal?
Yeah, it's going to be a tricky situation there as that all pans out for the Cincinnati Bengals. I am going to be so interested to see how we continue to go further in this wide receiver quarterback market where players are getting paid such enormous amount of money at the quarterback and wide receiver position. How else can you build out that roster? It does seem like this would be the last year for T. Higgins with the Cincinnati Bengals simply because they're going to have to pay players like Joe Burrow, like Jamar Chase. And so how teams balance their rosters out going forward, I think this will be a good case study of how you kind of all break it down. It should be interesting for sure, and we'll continue to break that down right here on the GM Shuffle. But when we come back, there are 2 new starting quarterbacks that were named recently. In Pittsburgh, Russell Wilson has apparently beat out Justin Fields for the number 1 for the quarterback 1 job. And in New England, it won't be Drake May. It will be Jacoby Brissett that will be the starting quarterback. We'll talk about that in a moment, but when we come back from break. But first, real quick, for the fantasy football players out here, Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, who's wide receiver 1 going into the season?
For me, it's Chase, because with Burton playing well on the outside, they're going to move Chase inside. And Chase is going to have a little bit of a Tyreek Hill feel to him. So I think he's going to come inside and play there. I love both players. I think the Cowboys' offensive line is going to be better than most people think because Guyton looked very good in the preseason. So I do think their offense will be improved. I don't know if Dalvin Cook's going to add much to the run game, but I do like Chase. But I like Lamb as well.
Yeah, I like Lamb a lot. I think we'll probably have a little head-to-head battle on who's going to be the number 1 wide receiver in fantasy football, and that discussion will be ongoing throughout this season. But with that being said, another discussion going out throughout the season, who's going to be the starting quarterback for multiple teams? We'll return to the GM Shuffle with that discussion.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN.
All 32 NFL teams finally have named their starting quarterback. In New England, it's going to be Jacoby Brissett. In Pittsburgh, it is going to be Russell Wilson. You're listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by Smirnoff. We do game days. Please drink responsibly. The Smirnoff Company, New York, New York. 17 straight years, Michael. Mike Tomlin has had a 500 record or better, and he's hoping to extend that to 18 years this year with a new quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers. It will be Russell Wilson, but I know there are going to be many people who imagine eventually Justin Fields will become the starter if the season doesn't get off to the start that the Pittsburgh Steelers would like. So let's just go through the first 8 games of the season for the Pittsburgh Steelers. They start at Atlanta, then at Denver, home for the Chargers, at the Colts, home for the Dallas Cowboys, at the Las Vegas Raiders, then the New York Jets at home, then the New York Giants at home. I see some winnable games here, particularly that Giants game in week number 8 at Las Vegas. That seems like a winnable game. You don't know where Bo Nix is going to be in week 2. Those are 3 wins that you could probably look at for the Pittsburgh Steelers. How do you think it kind of pans out here for Russell Wilson as he's now the number 1 starter for the Pittsburgh Steelers?
Yeah, I don't know if it's tied to wins. I think it's tied to his performance. I think if he protects the football, right? If he protects the football and is making enough plays in the passing game, he'll keep the job. But if he's not making plays in the passing game, if his eye level's down and he's getting sacked and he's trying to go out the pocket to the right or to the left like he's been doing the last 3 years, then I think they've got to make the change. But I don't think that Russell Wilson he's been named the starter for week 1. I think Justin Fields will play in week 1 in some role, as Mike Tomlin indicated, some kind of wildcat, some kind of play. They're going to need to create some plays with the quarterback position because based on the last 3 years, Russell hasn't done that. He hasn't thrown the ball down the field. His yards per attempt is trending in the wrong direction. So, look, it's like John Madden says, when you have 2 quarterbacks, you don't have any. They're going to try to manage this position. I think it's going to be like a hockey line. I don't see either quarterback being able to solidify the starting job. I could see Russell getting benched by the week 3 of the season if they start out 0-2. I could see Fields getting benched after the bye week if they don't play well. I could see him just rotating it kind of in and out, using a special kind of offense for Fields. One thing, Arthur Smith, these 2 quarterbacks, they're different, but they run similar. They kind of have the same feel to them. Obviously, Fields runs much better than Russell does at his age, but you're going to need to do the same thing, which makes it a lot easier for Russell Wilson and Fields to be interchangeable.
Yeah, I know there's some fantasy football players out there that are kind of waiting for Justin Fields to become the starting quarterback because regardless of how he performs on the actual NFL field, he does provide some fantasy football value. As I look at the entirety of the team, I am going to be very hesitant to put any of those players on my fantasy rosters, but sticking to the actual NFL implications of them on the field. You know, there are some people out there that have the train of thought that unless Russell Wilson is significantly better, it's just going to make sense to have Justin Fields as your starter, considering the age. And potentially, Michael, there could be a team out there, and give me your opinion, that might value Russell Wilson in terms of giving up compensation for him at a certain part in the season. Could you see that actually being a case here where the management from the Pittsburgh Steelers says the difference between these 2 guys isn't strong enough to turn down potential value in the draft for trading away Russell Wilson?
Yeah, I don't think they'll get much value for Russell. I mean, they would get a late pick if they got anything. I mean, his contract, it doesn't really matter, but I don't think that'll happen. Here's what I do think. I think that Russell will keep the job. The problem with going to Fields, and Fields has got a better, I think part of it is you answered it. People like Fields because he does provide fantasy points. I think that's where he gets a strong contingency from.
Yes.
Even though when you watch him play, he makes too many bad plays for any offense to be consistent. Now, you know, he had this great camp, but now we find out it wasn't a great camp. Like most of these camps, they get overvalued. So I think they'll keep both of them. Look, the Steelers are going to be in the quarterback shopping business. There's no question. They have to. They need to find a full-time starter. They haven't been able to solve the Ben Roethlisberger problem for a long time, and now they need to do it. I don't think they can get any closer. I don't think they can do it without solving that problem.
You know, what's interesting, a lot of people last year, and you talked about fantasy issues, a lot of people were not happy with Arthur Smith in the way that he did not use Bijan Robinson as maybe a lot of people anticipated when they used their draft pick on him. What do you think Arthur Smith can actually do to change how this Pittsburgh Steelers offense has looked? Because last year, the Pittsburgh Steelers offense wasn't too impressive. And again, people were disappointed with Arthur Smith. Some might have said it was a questionable hire considering the lack of dynamic play that you had from the Atlanta Falcons last year, despite some of the playmakers that they had.
Well, I think Atlanta, you know, I think he got a bad rap in Atlanta. Atlanta's the slowest team on offense in football. You know, Drake London's a possession receiver. Kyle Pitts had a bad knee, couldn't make a play. Think about this, Harrison. The 2 longest plays that Atlanta had offensively was a tight end screen to Jonnu Smith and a wheel route to Bijan Robinson. No receiver gave them any explosive plays. So you can blame Arthur Smith all you want, but their talent, now they have a high opinion of themselves in Atlanta. I got a phone call from a friend of mine who lives in Atlanta, and they all think they're going to the Super Bowl. The whole city does,
yes,
which is wonderful. Yeah, they think they're going to the Super Bowl, which is great. I'm not sure they're as skilled. Now, Bijan's a great player, but they're not as skilled. And Pitts, he's not a tight end. I love how people give poor Arthur Smith crap. You know, he wasn't in 11 personnel very much. He wasn't, you know, he was the least amount of 11 personnel of any team in the National Football League last year. Well, what the hell do you think Kyle Pitts is? You think he's a tight end? He don't block anybody. He's a wide receiver. He was in 11 more than anybody. When they had Jonnu Smith on the field, if they just had Pitts on the field and 3 other receivers, they were in 10. this is where analytics gets into a problem. You have to classify the player. Like when you have a guy on the field that's just a receiver, all right, Dalton Kincaid, if he can block a little bit for Buffalo, then we can classify that at 12. But if he doesn't block anybody, they're going to call that 11. Now, I think Kincaid can block. Pitts hasn't blocked anybody. So I think Arthur gets a bad rap. I think what Arthur's going to do is he's always been able to teach the outside zone play. He's always had a good ability to have play action pass. I think that's what he's going to try to do. Look, the Steelers' formula for winning ain't going to change, Harrison. They're going to play good defense, protect the football, and try to win the game in the fourth quarter.
Yes, indeed. It reminds me, I got to take a look at those NFL Defensive Player of the Year odds and really it feels like every year it's worth placing a ticket or two on TJ Watt because of his ability to get after the quarterback in that Pittsburgh Steelers defense. Speaking of another defense, Gerard Mayo, the head coach now of the New England Patriots, that defense last year, still one of the better units in the NFL. The question was, can they actually score the football? I don't know how much better they'll be on that side of the football because they're not necessarily starting a heralded guy at the quarterback position. Jacoby Brissett, now the number one QB for the New England Patriots. Drake May will be coming off the bench. But we all feel at some point here, Drake May will become the starter for the New England Patriots. When do you think that happens? And your thoughts on Mayo's decision to put the rookie on the bench to start the season?
You know, it's interesting. I think there's no question that Jacoby Brissett is a placeholder. I don't want to call him a test dummy, but I think he's going in there because the line isn't very good. And I think the whole plan wasn't to play Drake May this year. I think the reason they're holding back is because they want to get this offensive line some continuity before they put him out there. I say week 4 or week 5, Drake May's the starter. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. And I think he's going to go back out there. Look, Brissett was signed to be in there, and he's going to have to make plays. But look, you know this. They go into that line in Cincinnati moved down to 8.5. It was at 9.5 at one point. I don't know why it's moving towards New England. I don't know how New England's going to score points. I really don't.
Yeah, they're going up against Lou Anarumo's defense in week number 1 against the Cincinnati Bengals. That will be on the road. Then they're hosting the Seattle Seahawks, on the road for the Jets, on the road for the 49ers. A brutal first 4 games for the New England Patriots and the first-year head coach Gerard Mayo. Maybe by then we could see a shift there for the New England Patriots. I do wonder, though, Michael, if you are as a GM, as a former executive, how would you approach maybe some of your players on the defensive side of the ball? How would you approach maybe some of your wide receivers when you're kind of in this position where it's the big elephant in the room? Jacoby Brissett is just a placeholder. There's not a lot of, yes, you can have faith that he could play well, but you kind of know in the back of your head the rookie is coming. And when you start a rookie quarterback, the expectation level is not going to be at the Caleb Williams expectation level. How do you keep the morale going for a team that probably goes into the season in their heart of hearts knowing that they're not a playoff team?
Right. I think what Mayo has to do is convince the team there's a certain style we have to play, whether it's Brissett playing or whether it's May playing. We got to run the football effectively. We're going to have to play good defense. We're going to have to use the Pittsburgh formula. We're going to have to get the game in the fourth quarter. Let's be clear. If it becomes a 40-pass game with whether you have May in the game or whether you have Brissett in the game, New England's going to lose, and they're not going to cover a lot of games because the game's going to get away from them. If they're trailing at halftime, which is a good chance they will be, the game, and they come out and try to throw the ball to get back in the game, that lead's going to go from 10 points to 17 points, and the game's going to be over. It's going to be very challenging. So for me, they've got to be very careful how they approach it, whether Brissett's the quarterback or whether May. If May's in there and they try to think they're going to throw it 40 to 45, it ain't going to work. It's not. They have one formula to keep the game. They got to get the game to the fourth quarter and try to win it and make a play with their defense and hope their defense is as good as it was last year.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how the season pans out here for the New England Patriots. I have the Patriots, Michael. I play a Survivor League, and in my Survivor League, what we do, we pick the loser every week, not a new winner, because there's actually a lot more good teams than there are bad teams in the NFL. So I'm going to hold on to using the Patriots. I know I could probably count on them for a week number 1 loss, but I maybe will save them for, let's just say, when they travel to Miami late in the season. or maybe when actually their schedule is actually not too bad, or maybe when they travel to Buffalo in week number 16. Those seems like an ideal time to focus in on using them in my Survivor League. Are you in a Survivor League?
I don't do any of that, but I love to give advice on it. I love to watch it. I love to every week. I love to have. The only contest I'm in is with Mad Dog Russo on Friday afternoon, where he and I go head to head. I've won it 2 years out of 3, but I'm going to beat him this year again.
There we go. You already called it like you calling it like you see it. This is the GM Shuffle presented by Smirnoff. We'll be right back after the break.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN.
This is the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi. Hello, guys. I'm Harrison Sanford. We're back for another segment of the show. And, Michael, I must say, over the past couple of years, one of my favorite offenses to watch has been one led by Justin Herbert. The Los Angeles Chargers were definitely dynamic. It's going to look very different for the Chargers this time around. Justin Herbert no longer has Keenan Allen, no longer has Mike Williams. They're gone. Jim Harbaugh is in at head coach. And because Justin Herbert had an injury during training camp, there looks to be some reinforcements coming in for their quarterback room. Taylor Heinicke was traded to the Los Angeles Chargers for a conditional 6th-round pick. Maybe that shows the level of concern that the Chargers had about Mr. Herbert, as he had the plantar fascia injury in his right foot.
Well, I think it's a concern about Easton Stick, who's not very good. He's a 3rd-string quarterback at best. He's not a second. So they needed a backup. Now, Tyler Huntley got cut today by Cleveland. They could obviously talk about that because, remember, John Harbaugh had Huntley out there with him in Baltimore, and Jim and John talk all the time. I wouldn't be surprised if they kept Heinicke and brought in Huntley as the 3rd and then cut Stick and have 3. Now you have a decent quarterback room. Now you got a chance because you got one guy who was a Pro Bowler. Not that he's a Pro Bowler, but he was. And you got another guy who started and played in playoff games. So you've really improved your team. That would not surprise me at all if the Chargers did that. But the Browns kept him on because they felt like if you keep a guy on the roster, somebody's got to trade for him. Well, the guy's a vested veteran. So he's a free agent immediately after he's told he's no longer on the team. So he doesn't have to go through the waiver wire. And so then he can pick and choose wherever he wants to go. It's hard to hold a veteran back for trade. That's why Taylor Heinicke went for a 6 conditional, meaning he's got to be on the roster a certain amount of time. You know, for the Atlanta Falcons, again, I'm bedazzled again. Hey, here you go. You don't play Michael Penix at all. But
bedazzled, I haven't. That's a Scrabble word for you.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen him play in the preseason. He played very limited. He threw, 20 passes his whole preseason time. Now he's the backup quarterback. I mean, Heinicke took all the reps. Now he's the backup quarterback. What happens in week 1 against Pittsburgh if T.J. Watt knocks the hell out of Kirk Cousins and now you got to put Penix in the game, who's had no experience playing? Meanwhile, Patrick Mahomes is playing for the Chiefs. Everything Atlanta does, I just shake my head. I'm like, that makes no sense at all. Well, of course, why wouldn't you give a guy, A.J. Terrell, who has no career interceptions in the last 2 years, no interceptions in the last 2 years, why wouldn't you make him the second highest paid corner in the National Football League? My question would be for Chris Olsen, the player, the guy who handles the salary cap for Atlanta. Hey, Chris, do you ever say no to somebody? How about saying no? Like, you haven't had an interception in 2 years. You've broken up 19 passes in 2 seasons. At what point do you tell the agent, you got to make plays on the ball to become the second highest paid corner? You just give them the money? It's ridiculous. You want to negotiate against Olsen. He'll give you everything.
You know, I didn't realize A.J. Terrell has gotten such high acclaim. I didn't realize I didn't even see it. That didn't even sound right to me. No interceptions.
No interceptions. He's only had 4 in his career. He's played 4 years. He had 3 years ago and 1 his rookie season. Look, the reality of a corner is you got to make plays on the ball. 19 passes broken up in 2 years. Like, how many times do you touch the ball? If you don't touch the ball, how am I going to make you the second highest paid corner in the league? I mean, it's ridiculous. Like, it's okay. I think he's a good player. Yeah. But he's not the second highest paid corner in the league. It's ridiculous. But again, that logic. Now we trade Heineke, who we played all summer, to get a conditional 6. Meanwhile, Penix is sitting there. He's like Cameron's car in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. He's never going to get driven.
Atlanta Falcons, the favorites to win the NFC South. As you can hear, Michael has some skepticism about how they are operating as the favorites of that division. Speaking of some questionable decisions or questionable quotes, Robert Saleh, head coach.
Welcome to the shuffle. This is Robert Saleh territory here. Welcome. Are you a Jet fan, by the way, Harrison? Are you a Jet or a Giant fan?
No. We don't do the Jets over on this side. I am a Giants fan.
Who are you? Who do we root for? Who are you rooting for?
I am a Giants fan. I have been fortunate enough to celebrate 2 Super Bowls in my lifetime. So I am very happy. I know there are some true, authentic fans who are not going to appreciate what I'm going to say, but I'm going to say it nonetheless. This year, I'm not going to be watching the New York Giants. I am going to be watching the primetime games, and I'll be watching Red Zone or any other game that does not involve the Giants because, from my opinion, we're one of those teams that, frankly, doesn't have a quarterback. And when you don't have a quarterback, you don't get a great chance on winning. And so I'm not signing up to watch them lose every Sunday. And actually, if they do win a game, I might have a modicum of disappointment because it means it's going to be a lot harder for them to get the Carson Becks or the Shadur Sanders or the Quinn Ewers of the world. So it's going to be a challenging year. I'll be rooting for my fantasy team, and I will be rooting for my DraftKings betting account. Hopefully, some money comes into the coffers this season.
I love that.
But
let's go back to Saleh. So Saleh, I mean, I don't know. He says that Riddick is, still the timetable is for still to play. Well, if the kid's held out this long, and he's lost, I think he's lost $5 million at this point. He's missed 3 preseason games. He's missed the offseason. He's been fined $50K. I mean, it's just the meter's running. I mean, he's taking a cab from Santa Monica to New York City. I mean, that's the cab that's running. Like, at what point does he just say, okay, enough is enough?
Can you explain how we even have gotten here? Because Hassan Reddick obviously traded from the Philadelphia Eagles to get to the New York Jets. The contract was an issue at that point. I'm perplexed how we've gotten to this point because when you make a trade for somebody who's having a contract dispute, one would assume that the contract is already kind of balanced out or kind of sorted out already before that trade takes place. So you don't have a situation like the Jets are currently in.
Yeah, well, that's what's called being a general manager. You're not making this trade until you get those T's crossed and I's dotted. Now, they claim they had it, but they didn't have it in writing. Like, you knew Riddick wanted a new contract last year. It was pretty clear, right? That's all he talked about. And Philly felt like he was disruptive from within on their team. So Philly was going to get rid of him. Now, Philly wasn't going to give him away. He was a good player. He's been producing for a long time in the league since he left Arizona and went to Carolina and Philly. So he's got credentials. So they're not going to give him away. But when you buy somebody else's problem, you want to eliminate the problem. It would be like the 49ers trading Brandon Aiyuk and he doesn't redo his deal. You want that problem? It's exactly the same thing. Now, Aiyuk is sitting in so he doesn't get fined, which has made the problem worse, right? Like, this sitting in hasn't resolved the problem. The sitting in with Jamar Chase hasn't resolved the problem. Like, at what point do you say, wait a minute, what are we doing here? Like, we're extending you goodwill and letting you sit in and not practice, but it's really just affecting us. It's hurting our team. We've talked nothing about anything but Brandon Aiyuk and Jamar Chase. It's the same thing with Riddick. Like, Riddick, I mean, at least he held out. I don't see how it ends up, but look, Saleh, he comes to the press conference. I don't know who preps Saleh for a press conference. I really don't. I have no idea.
Oh, goodness. Michael, I must say it has been a joy doing the show with you, and I will be tuning in, of course, for the remainder of the season. Michael Lombardi, Harrison Sanford, this has been the GM Shuffle presented to you by DraftKings. Make sure you subscribe, rate, and review, and find us on DraftKings YouTube as well, and give us a comment, a like, all those things that keep this show going. We appreciate you guys, and make sure you tune in next time.
Thank you, Harrison. Appreciate you.